Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. This is probably like the third attempt now to install the radiator on this car. The first time I didn't work out because I got a radiator that had some damage on it. The second time my truck broke, so instead of working on my white MR2 and getting all this stuff done, I had to fix my truck. And so here's the third attempt, and let's hope it goes smooth. And just for a little background, I got a unbranded radiator, or some, radiator that people would call like eBay specials, mainly because they seem pretty similar quality to the branded one. So figure I'll put my money where my mouth is, go buy one, and we'll see how it goes. I do have a gut feeling though that it's going to end up going really good and there's going to be no issues. And I do kind of feel like anything's going to be an upgrade because I have an NA chassis, which means I have a smaller radiator, but also this is the original one to the car, I do believe, or at least OEM, and it's been on here for some time. I figure after close to 30 years, it's time for a new one. And in this box, we got the new one. Getting this one was not the easiest thing, but it was totally worth it. As you can see, this thing looks amazing. Not any issues or blemishes or nothing like that. Also, if you'll notice, right next to this box, I have another box because I ended up getting the fans that go along with it. This looks like it's pretty good quality. Nothing wrong here. No broken fans this time. So I'm very happy with that. One thing I want to know is just notice how both of these boxes are identical. The radiator I got from Prime MR2. This is the second one I got from them because the first one I got had some damage. Initially, I got fans with it, but I ended up sending those back because they requested them back. So I went online to go get some fans to go along with the new radiator. And the reason I'm even mentioning this is that both products came in identical boxes, shipped from the same place. So what I'm assuming happened is, even though I bought it from two different companies, they had the same supplier. Taking all that into account, if you're trying to save a few bucks, I'd recommend going to eBay just because that's where you're going to find the best prices. And I used to sell on eBay and I've bought stuff on eBay. Just from my personal experience, eBay tends to favor the buyer. So if you have any issues, odds are you're going to get taken care of either through the seller or through eBay dispute services. We're going to leave this stuff alone for the moment. Right now, we're going to pull out the old radiator, and normally there is a cover here. I took that off a few months ago when I initially tried to replace this whole unit. Of course, that didn't work out well. And on the bottom of the car, there's actually a panel there that's held on with a bunch of 10mm bolts. Of course, I took that off again a few months ago when I tried to initially replace the whole unit. And if anyone is curious why all this is disassembled, that's because this car wasn't a wreck before I bought it 5 years ago. I never bothered to replace anything because, well, I didn't think I was going to have the car that long. Things changed, ended up being, or it's turning into a forever car. So the point is, that's why the whole front end is disassembled. If you're doing this, you don't actually have to disassemble the front end. Since we already got those things out of the way, it's going to be pretty simple for us. I know I got to take off these two bolts here for the bracket. I'll also have to take off the hoses. They have been on there for ages, so that might be a bit of a pain. And then of course, the fans, there's two bolts on the top and then two bolts on the bottom. I almost forgot, I'm also going to have to take off the hood latch just to give me a little bit of extra room. I have been struggling with the hoses for like the last 5 minutes, and I just realized, why do I even care like if I mess them up? Because I have new hoses. I changed my approach a little bit, or I will be changing my approach a little bit. As you can see, it's partially off and I just can't get it that last like inch. I'm just gonna cut it right here, just like right after the radiator on both sides. And then from there, once the radiator's out, I'll easily be able to pull it off from the other side. It's just gonna give me a little bit more room to work with. And as I said, I got new hoses, so it doesn't matter. Now that we got the old radiator out, we can compare the new one to it. So up top right here is the old unit. It's actually a little bit smaller from at least everything that I've seen. All the aftermarket radiators that are out there are the size of the turbo one. So that's why this one's a little bit bigger than that one. Everything should line up pretty well though, and it's pretty identical. We have the hole here for the coolant temp sensor. Right here is to drain it. Of course, both of those outlets, or the outlet inlet, whatever. Then up here, we got the bleeder valve to obviously bleed the air out of the coolant system. This should fit in with no modification. The only exception to that is that these little plastic things, they're actually on both sides. I'm gonna have to take them out. I probably could trim these down to keep them in there, but honestly, I just don't care to do that. I don't think it's gonna make that big of a difference on the cooling system. For those who are curious, right here are the NA fans. They would take some modification to work in this application. Right here's the top, and you can see the bolts don't even actually line up. And down here at the
bottom, they don't line up as well. Nothing does. So this would take some modification to get to work.
I knew the NA fans weren't going to work without some modification, so I went to go grab some turbo fans. But the prices on everything have really skyrocketed. A year and a half ago, I think 2 years ago now, I bought some turbo fans for the V6 MR2, and this is actually one of them. I pulled them off just for the purposes of this video, and I paid 60 bucks shipped to my house. When I was looking around online, people were trying to charge me about 150 bucks, and I was like, screw that. That is like, that just doesn't make sense. They're 30-year-old fans at this point. And I knew I could buy just new fans for cheaper, so that's the route I ended up going. But as I said, I pulled this off the V6 MR2 just to kind of show you guys what the fitment might be like.
The turbo fans actually fit a lot better. Right there, those two holes line up, so they just have to be enlarged a little bit. And then right up here, I would need to bend this little tab. So it actually wouldn't take much to get this to fit. Just bending the tab and then enlarging both of these holes.
It's really not that bad. If I could have found a set for cheaper, that's probably the route I would have gone, because I do think that the like OEM fans have a lot better design than the ones I got. And let me show you.
Here are the fans I got, and then the OEM fans. You know, in stop and go traffic, both of them are going to do perfectly fine. But at high speeds, I think this one's going to have better airflow. This one's going to be a little bit more restrictive. We're going to test fit this fan on just to see how the fitment's like. I imagine I'm going to have to enlarge some holes or something like that, just because these things are never perfect. Oh, that's not bad at all. So right there, those two holes are relatively lined up. This one and this one. So yeah, these two bottom holes just have to be enlarged just the slightest amount.
Hey everyone, it is about a week later. I was feeling a little tired, so I ended up calling it a night. Since the last time I filmed anything, I have done a little bit of work off camera, but nothing major.
First thing I did was I wiped all this stuff down. It's not perfect, you could still see lots of grime, but it's better than it was. Also, these little things that sit on the side there, I think this is, yeah, this is the driver's side. I took this off. They're only held in place by 2 push pins. There's one right there, and then there's one right over here. It's probably gonna be hard to see, but I went and put the bushings that support the radiator back into the chassis, so there's 2.
It's pretty hard to miss them actually. There's these openings, so they just kind of slip right in.
And the other thing I did was I enlarged these holes. I did kind of mess up because I just went to the biggest drill bit I had, drilled it out. It's still functional, but when I have the bolt on there, you can kind of see this little portion where the hole is, but that's not the biggest deal in the world. I only enlarged the bottom 2. The top 2 were totally fine. The other thing I did is I went ahead and I switched out the coolant temp sensor from the old radiator into the new one.
Now that we got all that out of the way, we'll get back to actually working on this thing and getting the radiator put back in.
Pretty much the last thing we got to do before everything goes back in is just wire these fans up. So if I come over here to my OEM fans, you're actually going to see that the wires are the same. So there's a blue one and then there's a black one, blue one and black one. So my plan is to snip these off and then just splice them into here. But these fans are actually really, really nice and they're good condition. So right over here, I have some old fans that are honestly really, really cruddy, and I'm going to take the pigtails off of these.
My whole reason for doing that is I just don't know if I'm going to like this fan setup. So if I don't like it, I can go back to the OEM setup and just modify the fans to work for this application. Fans are all wired in, but I did mess up.
I totally forgot to put these protective coverings back on, and I think it ended up working out because I don't think it would have actually fit over the butt connector right here.
Pretty much the next thing to do is actually test to make sure that the fans actually do work before I put the radiator back in, but I messed up one more time. I actually forgot my keys, so I need to run home, grab my keys, and come back. So we'll pick this up again here in about 15. I am back, and I got the keys right here, and so if anyone doesn't know this,
right down here is the plug for the coolant temperature sensor.
I actually don't even think I mentioned it when I pulled the radiator out, but that's something you have to disconnect when you pull the radiator. If you have that unplugged, the fans will automatically turn on. So that's just a quick, easy way to see if the fans will work.
All right. Oops. Crud. What did they just do? Oh, man. All right. They work.
That was really stupid of me. I don't know if you guys heard that. They actually slipped and fell over. I don't think it did any damage though.
I'm looking it over. Yeah, I don't think it did any damage.
But the fans work and they pull the air through. So that's all we needed to see. I decided I am going to retest the fans one more time. Specifically this fan, because like when it like tipped over, it pulled on the wiring here. I double checked everything. Nothing seems loose. This fan's totally fine. I'm gonna give this a second go and I hope nothing's messed up.
Fans are working. Yes, it's actually pulling the air through. So we got it the right way, because had we gotten it backwards, it would actually be pushing, but it's pulling. I can feel it going through. Here's a good representation of what I'm talking about. You can see that it's actually pushing the glove this way versus here, it's trying to suck it in.
Now it's actually time to start installing things. And the first thing I'm gonna do is actually undo these two bolts, and then this little metal plate, I'm gonna scoot it back because that's gonna allow me to slide the radiator hose back. This side's gonna be the same thing. Undo these two bolts, slide this little plate back, and it's gonna allow me to slide the radiator hose back. The whole reason I'm doing it that way is that it's a lot easier because it's such a tight space. If you put the radiator in and then try to put in the hoses afterwards, it's a huge pain. If you try to put the radiator in with the hoses, it's also a huge pain. So from just personal experience and my preference, I found that if I put the hoses on first, put the radiator in, I can come back and easily slip the hoses back on. On this side here, I was having some difficulty putting the hose on. So what I ended up doing is I took the hose off, and then I went over here and I used a little bit of dish soap. So I got just the smallest amount on my finger and put it on the inside of the hose. And the whole idea is that it'll dry relatively quickly and shouldn't really impact anything. I was able to get this side on, slid it in, and then when I was trying to get the other side, the dish soap had dried up and it was such a pain. And yeah, that led to me accidentally tearing this.
Assuming I hadn't torn up the hose, all we would have had to do is connect the fans and then put the new brackets in and then bleed the cooling system.
And because of that, I really want to get it done in one video. My plan right now is I'm going to order a new hose. I'm going to actually go ahead and order the protective sleeve for the wiring. So that's all good. And hopefully that's here within the next few days. So we should be able to pick this back up again in a week or two. Hey everyone, it's been about a week again since that last clip, and I got the radiator fully installed.
Here on the passenger side, I went and replaced the hose that I had accidentally ripped. And then on this side, it actually bothered me to have two different colored hoses. So I went ahead and just switched one with the black hose as well. Then after that, it was pretty easy to get the radiator put back in. And I gotta tell you, putting the rubber hoses in actually, I think was the right call because it was so much easier to slide them in.
I went and I used the same method that I initially planned on, which is I used a little bit of soap to put it on the inside of the hose. I slipped it on the coolant pipes that are right here and right there, put them all the way back I could, and then I put the radiator in, and it was super easy to slide the hoses forward and get everything hooked up.
After the hoses, I went and hooked up the fans. Hey, if you look right there, the wiring's still exposed.
I totally forgot to buy the wiring loom. You can get it for really cheap on Amazon, and that's the route that I went. It's just not going to be here for this video. I'm just going to kind of leave the wiring off to the side, so when we bleed the system, it's out of the way and minimize the chance of it getting messed up.
The other thing I noticed is that there is a little bit of a gap between the fan shroud and the radiator.
The reason that's an issue is that when the fans are on, not all the air that's being pulled through is actually going to come through the radiator. It's not going to be as efficient. So to solve that, I'm going to get some double-sided 3M tape to help seal everything up, and it should be good.
I did run into one more additional fitment issues, and that is right here. So the brackets are bolted in, but it's actually not touching the top of the radiator. I can move it around a bit.
And oddly enough, when I searched on the forums to see if anyone else had this issue, I only found, I think it was like 1 or 2 other people. I don't know if it's an issue with my bracket, or maybe it's just kind of like a fitment thing, like in terms of tolerances with the radiator, because again, it is an unbranded radiator. I'm not really sure I'm going to address this one yet because I thought maybe I could just get some 3M tape just to kind of make up the difference there. There's the other side of me that said, well, maybe it's just my bracket. I mean, the thing's 30 years old, so I'm not sure. All the little fitment things I just mentioned really aren't a big deal, but considering the whole point of this video, I figure it's important to give people like a realistic expectation of just some of the minor things that might come up. The last thing left to do is just bleed the car.
I did lift up the back end of the MR2, so whenever I bleed the car, I put the back end up to make it the highest point, make some of the air a little bit easier to get out. We're gonna fill up the car, and if you notice, I'm actually just using bottled water, and the whole reason I'm doing that is, well, I'm actually only bleeding the system just to kind of go through the motions for this video. I have plans to do the fuel pump relatively soon, and when I do that, I'm gonna drain out the coolant because one of the heater core lines is actually cracked, so that needs to be fixed. The point is, normally you don't want to use just pure water because that can cause issues with corrosion, so use some type of blend of coolant and water. This is her first start in a while, so keeping my fingers crossed. Oh yeah, good old reliable. Oh, I'm gonna turn this on. That's good. I'm gonna leave this back here and then hook up the heater hoses right now. Right here is one point where we hook up a hose to bleed it. Right over there is another point where we hook up a hose to heat it. This line's in the way, but if you can get a flathead up top and you can open this up, it will bleed out some of the air that's in the system.
And I realized I made a mistake. In my truck, I have a bag which has both lines. Well, I don't have my truck with me. I actually have my Chevy, I don't know if you can see that. I have my Chevy Malibu today. So what I'm gonna try to do is improvise. I have this hose laying around, and my plan is I'll actually start at the radiator right here.
I'll hook it up here, do my best to bleed out all the air here, and then once I'm done there, I'll go over here and do my best to bleed out all the air there.
That's definitely not the right way to do it. So normally, again, you really want
Both hoses hooked up, valves open at the same time. Opening this up. It's a tight fit, but it's on there.
The car's been going for a few minutes. Everything's looking good. Surprisingly, no leaks. It's pretty common where, like, I know I personally will miss something.
And I topped it off. Water's still coming out. If we come over here, this doesn't fit perfectly, so a little bit of water's coming out. If I get it just right, it won't squeeze any water out.
The car's been on for about, I don't know, 10 minutes or so, and there's not really any more air bubbles coming out.
All right, I gotta be quick here. Okay, there you go. I got it hooked up. There you go. Yeah, there's lots of air bubbles there.
The car definitely has lots of air bubbles, as you just saw there, but everything's going good. Kind of revving it up a little bit, trying to get some of the bubbles out. Before shutting everything off, I'm gonna go ahead and close up this valve. The heater, surprisingly, is super warm. I didn't expect it to actually get warm because of the leak.
Okay, we're gonna turn the car off.
I apologize if you hear some like dripping in the background. I'm actually already taking out the water out of the cooling system. But anyways, just for some final thoughts. Yes, this does have some minor fitment issues, but if that's all I have to deal with and this thing lasts a while, I totally think that these unbranded radiators are worth it. I don't really got much else for this video, so if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments section below. I'll do my best to answer them, and stick around because I do have plans to track this MR2. Probably gonna be a little bit since, you know, it's in a state of disrepair, but I will end up tracking it. I'm gonna beat up on the car. So I guess we'll see how it stands up to abuse. And again, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.